Evaluating what another human being actually knows is a highly complex engineering problem. To design a working test, educators have to balance a fragile set of variables, measuring for accuracy, adjusting for stress, and locking down security, all to find the optimal way to quantify intelligence. For over a century, the historical default solution to that equation was the mass-supervised final exam. It was an industrialized approach to education, forcing hundreds of students into a synchronized, strictly monitored environment. Then the COVID-19 pandemic broke that established machinery. Almost overnight, schools were forced into remote learning setups, isolating students behind screens and instantly ending the long reign of the mass exam hall. Suddenly, teachers couldn't rely on the old methods of supervision. This global disruption forced the educational system to pause and ask a much harder question. What exact skills is our testing machinery actually trying to optimize for? The traditional exam survived a century by solving a specific logistical problem. It was highly optimized for absolute fairness and locking down security. By tightly controlling the environment and the clock, schools could practically guarantee that cheating was impossible. It also scaled perfectly. Handing out a single standardized paper to 300 students at once is incredibly fast and cheap for a school district to process and grade. But recent research by Palaposky and colleagues reveals a fatal flaw in this design. High-stakes final exams heavily skew toward measuring a student's stress tolerance. Excellent students often score poorly simply because they panic under a ticking clock, meaning the grade reflects their anxiety rather than their mastery of the subject. Look at this knowledge retention chart. Under the legacy system, students are incentivized toward rote learning. They spend sleepless nights cramming massive data into short-term memory, hit the test deadline, and then the knowledge evaporates entirely just days later. The result is a measurement tool that prioritizes administrative convenience over any true lasting educational impact. The pandemic accelerated the adoption of a totally different model, continuous assessment. Instead of gambling a student's entire grade on a single stressful afternoon, this system gathers dozens of smaller data points over the entire academic term. The intimidating final exam is replaced by a steady stream of weekly quizzes, regular essays, and ongoing collaborative projects. Studies by Pollack and Miller prove frequent testing forces information recall, pushing retained knowledge higher. It also provides real-time data, allowing teachers to spot and correct failures immediately, rather than discovering gaps months later. Continuous assessment successfully abandons the panicked performance of the exam hall, optimizing instead for daily discipline, time management, and deep, gradual learning. But dismantling the big final exam exposed a severe unintended consequence. By eliminating one massive stressor at the end of the year, schools accidentally created dozens of smaller, relentless stressors every single week. Educational researcher Ivers identified this as over-assessment. Students trade acute panic for a slow-burn exhaustion, facing a relentless barrage of midnight upload deadlines and constant grading that never actually stops. This bloat carries a heavy cognitive cost. When students are forced into a state of constant weekly output, they lose the quiet mental space required to actually sit back, process, and think deeply about the material they are supposed to be mastering. In our attempt to engineer test anxiety out of the system, we accidentally programmed chronic, inescapable fatigue right into it. And fatigue isn't even the system's biggest vulnerability. The legacy exam system survived on strict environmental control. At-home continuous assessment completely surrenders that control. When coursework is entirely unsupervised, the security floodgates open. It becomes incredibly easy for students to share answers, copy off each other, and engage in unpermitted collaboration. That baseline dishonesty is now amplified by an existential threat to the homework model, the rapid rise of consumer AI. Students can now generate essays, solve complex code, and complete massive projects in seconds without learning a single concept. No matter how beautifully an assessment system improves memory retention, it completely fails as a measurement tool if the data it collects is falsified. The solution to this optimization problem isn't retreating to the past or stubbornly defending a flawed new model. It requires a mandatory, systemic calibration to find the exact midpoint between the two. The ideal system has a strict set of requirements. It must test real, retained understanding without destroying student mental health, and it must allow for steady, measurable progress while completely blocking AI-generated shortcuts. The answer taking shape in modern education is a carefully tuned hybrid model. Schools are utilizing continuous, low-stakes weekly quizzes in the classroom to build deep knowledge over time, but returning to secured, supervised environments to actually verify that knowledge. This calibration neatly solves the opposing variables. The supervised setting instantly neutralizes the AI threat, while the low point value of the tests removes the dread of a massive final exam and cures the burnout of endless midnight homework deadlines. It recognizes that the ultimate purpose of testing isn't to judge a student at the finish line. It is to actively build their capability every single step of the way.